I'm joined today by Janina Slawski, who's head of investment consulting at Alexforbes. And one of the topics, well, the specific topic we're going to be looking at, is how technology plays a role in the investment space. Specifically AI, use of different algorithms and all these things, and how that comes to the fore and is applicable to that side. Janina, good day.
Hi there, Chris. Nice to be here today. It's great to speak about technology in the investment process, and I guess we have to talk about all the way from pure artificial intelligence and is that going to be a big part of our investment universe going forward, through to more quantitative investment strategies, which I think everyone will be far more familiar with, but even through to fundamental investment strategies, but what big data is going to be accessed by those strategies in the future and still enhancing the process. So I think let's start off with the artificial intelligence side. We certainly have asset managers, both locally and internationally, that have set up capabilities that are based on artificial intelligence. So obviously programs, taking data in, making decisions, and going into implementation. I think it's still fair to say that there will always still be an element of human overview.
Yeah.
So a combination of these sort of very AI-driven strategies, but with a intelligent oversight from a human still. Obviously, amazing algorithms, etc., can go drastically wrong, particularly when there's a lot of volatility in the markets, as we're seeing right now. I think you'd always want to have someone steering just to make sure unintended consequences and dramatic outcomes aren't coming through in the midst of black swans. Middle section in terms of quantitative strategies are very common and have attracted a lot of assets. Yeah, essentially you are looking at historically what is done well in different markets and allocating to those strategies as the process unfolds, not maybe pulling on the big data sets that you expect to see in artificial intelligence, but definitely more a quantitative type strategy. And then into the fundamental space, I guess this is where asset managers would say they are fundamental, they bottom up, they are very much human-based. But the reality is they are using more and more data as part of their process. They are drilling deeper into financial statements, into data points that are coming from industry providers, etc. But even though it's very much still fundamental, the big data concepts and the ability to, in particular, implement risk management using technology tools is also going to be a big concept. So I think technology is a fundamental part of asset management industry right now, but will have a growing impact, particularly in terms of artificial intelligence strategies and also quantitative strategies, and then especially risk management and sources of data on the fundamental side.
So, Janina, tell me, have these strategies attracted a lot of assets?
At this stage, I'd say fair to say no. In fact, I was looking at some of the BlackRock, Goldman Sachs type strategies this morning. So not a lot of assets flowing into pure AI strategies, and still relatively new in the South African market, so not attracting large scale. And even if you look at the quantitative investment strategies that have been around for some time, not necessarily very big. In fact, I think your biggest flows into sort of non-fundamental bottom-up research type strategies have gone into passive, so pure indexation investments. And I guess even there, a fair amount of technology overlay coming in, because it's not just which index do you choose, and there's a lot of science that goes into looking at which regions, strategies, sectors, etc. might outperform, but also a lot of technology in the background in terms of delivering a passive strategy. It's not just buy the basket of shares and hold. There is a lot of trading and optimization, etc. So certainly a lot of technology in the background of passive strategies. But fair to say, not the biggest part of the market as yet. A lot of flows continue to go into fundamental strategies. And certainly for South African investors, I think you still want the personality that's actually delivering your strategy to you and to really hear his or her views how they're implementing. They're not yet significant flows, but definitely where we see a trend into the future, particularly if any of these can be delivered at lower cost, then we would expect more and more investors to be interested. Certainly the younger generation,
Mm.
and I think they'll love the fact that there's a artificial intelligence overlay, low cost, that they can interact with, get invested in, etc. So I think it'll be a big trend into the future. Maybe not so much starting in South Africa, but certainly in some of the biggest investment regions across the world.
So, Janina, that's fascinating. I mean, now I'd like us to talk about the ESG side of things. And I had a very interesting chat with Mr. Todd Ashton, who's the Vice President for Africa for Ericsson. And these are the guys that supply the networks upon which the Vodacoms and the MTNs and all these guys deliver their services. Because the intention is, whatever we do, we need to be able to reach out to our furthest and furthest of members, sitting down in deep rural. We mustn't just focus on the kind of metropolitan areas. It's really critical that we roll out this technology and make it available. But now all of that becomes meaningless if there's no infrastructure, hence the reason for us talking to Ericsson. But then one step beyond that is also the infrastructure investments that can put that infrastructure there. I think that it's absolutely crucial. And this is where ESG fits into the picture absolutely correctly. So if you could maybe just clue us in on where we're at currently in the ESG front and what they're all about. Thank you very much.
All right, so infrastructure is definitely the topic of the day. A lot of focus for South Africa in terms of you have to invest into infrastructure in order to create an uplift in South Africa in terms of jobs and general community upliftments and so on. So we do see infrastructure as a critical investment, and obviously Retirement Fund South Africa potentially a big source of funds to go into infrastructure. Lots of challenges, unfortunately.
Sure.
So if you can invest into a listed company that does infrastructure, for example, the MTNs, etc., then you actually still in your traditional investment realm, but you investing somewhere that will lead to the positive benefits in terms of more ability of people to get access through cell calls, but also in terms of data, etc. But unfortunately, the more direct investment into infrastructure, we've spoken specifically about the cell technology, etc. But just generally, if you're trying to get roads into communities and get factories built, etc., a lot of these are big liquid investments, and it is quite difficult for your average retirement fund to get into those investments. A lot of focus, therefore, on how do we get more assets in. There's a lot of infrastructure funds that have been around for some time, and a lot more being developed, and those are investable opportunities. And we're just trying to see what's the way to get more medium-sized funds invested. It's having secondary markets, so that a small fund that needs to get its investment out, maybe it's going through a retrenchment exercise, maybe its share could be bought by another fund without there being terrible haircuts, etc. So infrastructure definitely strong overlay. It does fit within the overall ESG space, as you said. So investing into something that's uplifting communities is very much focused on social upliftment, job creation, etc. There's a lot of the infrastructure that is linked to environmental. So anything in the green energy space, renewable energy, just transition, etc. definitely fits. And governance, as we know, is fundamental to any investment. No member of a fund wants their money invested with some entity that doesn't have good governance and puts their assets at risk. So very much aligned. And maybe to take the conversation on ESG a bit broader in the technology and big data space, also a massive source of data for asset managers going forward. A lot of providers now doing ESG scoring in terms of different elements that gives an asset manager the ability to say, is this a good investment according to all of the different criteria? How do I interrogate it? Are there red flags and so on? So certainly better investments potentially in the future because of this access to more data. Although I would say that it's still early days. Unfortunately, you might get a company and with different ESG providers find it's a great company, a bad company, an awful company, all being the same company. So a lot more alignment needed over time in terms of this is actually a objective standard. But very exciting then to think that as part of the overall big data that an asset manager is using, be these quality inlays in terms of ESG, and that potentially makes much better investments for everyone. That's really much more positive for the world as well as South Africa.
So, Janina, tell me, what sort of technology processes do you guys use when in your asset manager selection process?
As I did for the investment strategy, a lot more data being used, but always with the requirement that you do have the human overlay. We are very technical in the way we review managers and decide what is the strengths that are leading to potentially best investment outcomes in the future. And always to emphasize that historic performance is not one of the significant drivers of that decision, because we're trying to look forwards, not backwards. So we do look at a lot of data in terms of the quality of the investment management team, what is their process, is it well articulated, etc. And a lot of that is art. There's no sort of hard and fast statistics that you can use there. But we do continue to add data over time. We've just spoken about the ESG data, so the scoring of a manager in the ESG space and the data used in that is part of what gets input. We're obviously running databases of the different managers and the criteria we use for scoring in order to come to overall views. And then I think very fundamentally, a lot of technology and overlay in the review of how managers will blend together.
Right.
The key part of portfolio construction for us is actually choosing managers that will combine together well. We get it often asked, this is a fantastic manager, you rate it highly, but you don't use them. Why? The answer will always be that when we add them, we look at what other managers we want to put into the mix. Are they a good match or not? That is very fundamental in terms of a technology overlay, because it's what in the end delivers the best solution for clients with the ability to withstand different cycles and different market conditions. And similarly to the way I spoke earlier about the risk management being implemented by individual asset managers, similarly our ongoing risk management is highly technically based. So for example, our portfolio managers will look daily at the combined portfolios of the underlying managers and say, is there an unintended bias towards, for example, too much rand hedges, too little gold exposure, or whatever the parameters are, and the ability to look into what the managers are holding and say, is it time to do an overlay or to shift between managers, etc. So there's a lot of human oversight because there's a lot of qualitative and arts, but fundamentally technology is a massive part of our overall process, and we only expect that to.
Can you give us some examples of big data and how that's used?
Obviously, I can't give away too much detail that is shared with us because that would be IP. But some of the examples I've really enjoyed are things like when a asset manager is trying to review different retailers, for example, and trying to work out that is their new store going to be value adding or is it going to detract? Is the shopping center really going to be a great center to deliver lots of customers, etc.? You've got data such as the cameras that look at the number of cars coming through, and they can take that data and actually work out are the volumes increasing as the malls opened, what is the time of day when it's busy, is it more of a weekend or is it during the day or evening, etc. So there's just a richness of data. Obviously, as you know, it means that you and I are being watched all the time by Big Brother.
True.
But that's solid data. It actually gives you something that you can actually take and now say, okay, this store, this mall is actually a sign of success for the future. This one's dying. Everyone's starting to go to other ones. So that's a very hard example, and you're probably all aware you're on camera like that all the time. Another example we've had is where we're looking at investments into agriculture and trying to understand, is it going to be a good season, which crops are going to be doing well. There we've seen evidence of using satellite imagery, where you can actually look at the fields across certain regions, for example in South Africa, and identifying like how high are the crops, how green
Right.
are the green patches.
Yeah.
Does it mean that it's mainly brown because the seeds are still small? Clearly here you've got them growing much higher. The others are starting to go to fruits, etc. So again, data that's there in the system, what would it normally be used for, and then how could it be applied in terms of an investment management decision that actually says, clearly we can see that this company owns farms in this region and it looks like they're doing well. This alternatively owns farms in this region and it looks like there's real issues developing. So hard data, and obviously much more detail than you could get just from weather report, or sort of indicative in terms of whether it's going to be a good crop season. So some really nice examples, but I said I won't share too much in terms of IP.
Janina, looking to the future, how do you guys see this panning out? Technology is certainly not going to stop. It's going to increase more and more and more. Metaverse, there's all these things coming. How do you see investment and the role it will play into the future?
It's just going to get bigger. I've been very clear in what I've said, that essentially we see technology as already being very fundamental to deliver of investment management, and that's just going to grow. Much more data, richness across all of the different investment styles, so that'll be a clear growth area. We will see growth of more assets heading towards technology-based investments, so whether it's artificial intelligence or quantitative investments, etc. But I think also, yes, the world's changing. Metaverse is exactly where we might see our future. And don't forget that investors change. So the younger generations come through will not want boring old investment strategies accessed in the normal way. They will want to go to the metaverse to look at what's available, to decide what they want to interact with. And that will be a growing part. And the reality is that companies don't, if they don't look at what opportunities there are there, they will get left behind. So I think it's going to be massive across all of the different elements. All our worlds will keep changing, and so will the investments will.
Janina, this is all fascinating stuff, and I can just picture a world, perhaps, very speculatively, thinking about a shopping mall that's been created in the metaverse that's forming part of some asset portfolio for a pension fund in the future, because it will be generating revenue, etc. So that could be one of the many things that we could look at going forward.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm really excited by the concepts. What we struggle in the retirement fund industry is actually getting closer to members and their benefits. You send a benefit statement by email or post, and a member just ignores it because it's nothing they can interact with. Whereas the concept that they go to their mall and they can actually go and visit their investment, see if it's grown, what does it look like, what has the asset manager done to make it interesting. You could actually get members seriously interacting with their investments and really taking ownership and understanding and loving it, etc. We've also got member reward systems. Imagine if we're sending our members to malls and they're going spending their points and understanding all of their ability to get awards, etc. It's great to think of members interacting with their investments and getting rewarded in the future on that basis. Very, very exciting to change the way we interact.
Wow, I think that, the possibilities are seemingly endless. And the more one sits and thinks about it, I think the more, little light bulbs will go on as more opportunities sort of can come to the fore. All right, 100%. Janina, thank you very much. It's been absolutely fascinating and lovely having you on the talk. Certainly look forward to having a chat about this again going forward. And I really want to thank you for your time. It's been really great.
It's been great being here. Thank you.